Welcome to another episode of Living the Pharm Life. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Brooke Patterson, a true powerhouse in medical affairs with a focus on oncology. Brooke is a Doctor of Pharmacy alumna from the Purdue College of Pharmacy, and she now leads the Lymphoma and Myeloid Therapeutic Area of Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. Her expertise spans hematologic malignancies and HIV management. She's a thought leader in the pharmacy industry. Brooke, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So just to get us started, I know everyone's career starts with passion.
Yep.
Can you tell us about your passion for pharmacy?
Yeah, I think it starts with a passion for helping people. So I sort of knew at a younger age that I really wanted to help people. And that came through a lot of different ways. My mom was a really good role model of that. She did a lot of volunteer work. And so I just had this kind of internal voice that said, you need to do something that allows you to make people's lives a little bit better. And so when I was in high school, I had done a volunteer project really at this little tiny free health clinic that was in the basement of a church. And I learned there really the power of medication and this idea of underserved communities and care gaps. And that started to really inform things. And I thought maybe I wanted to go to medical school and did some shadowing of that. That didn't feel quite right. But my mom had a cousin who was a clinical pharmacist at one of the VA hospitals in Chicago. And she was generous enough to let me shadow her for a day or two. And, this is the late 90s. This is, clinical pharmacy was just in its infancy then. And I got to see what she did. And I was just like, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. So then it was very easy because then I started looking for colleges where it was important to me that the School of Pharmacy was on main campus because I kind of knew that I wanted to do pharmacy, but I came from a college town. I grew up in Iowa City, and so I wanted to have kind of a normal college experience. And that search led me to Purdue. And the moment I got here, I knew this is where I wanted to be. And that idea of helping people has been the constant thread through every decision I've made in my career thus far.
What about Purdue stood out to you?
I think it was, I really felt like I was joining a family when I met with folks from the School of Pharmacy. It also was very clear, and I don't know how I had the foresight now that I think about my 18-year-old, 19-year-old brain, but it was very clear to me that the School of Pharmacy was doing novel things, that they were really being innovative, and that was something that was exciting to me as someone who doesn't like to take the normal path. And so I think that those things combined made it feel like it was going to be a perfect fit for me, and it absolutely was. And it's like my partner said to me, we were back a couple months ago, and he said, "Oh, you have been smiling the moment we hit town." And that's really how I feel about both my experience. I mean, yes, there were ups and downs, but so much of it was foundational to my career, and I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah, could you talk on some of those foundational moments of your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think, rotations were always a really powerful moment, and I worked at the University Hospital down in Louisville as part of rotations, and that's really where I got my first taste of health disparities and care gaps, and working in an urban lower income setting. That is where I got the taste or the interest in HIV, which then I went on to pursue and worked in the HIV field for almost a decade. Also just like working in the student pharmacy and learning how to counsel folks and learning all the aspects to put a prescription together, even though I haven't worked in a dispensing function in a really, really long time. I think understanding how a prescription comes from being written to the patient is, something that's really valuable. I'm always surprised when people are like, how do I get a prescription? I'm surprised to this day. And then I was in a sorority here at Purdue. I was in the Delta Gamma sorority, and I made some great friends through that, made some great friends for pharmacy school that are still part of my life 20 years later. It's really fun now to have people in career, to cross people that either I was in school with, were ahead of me, behind me, and to meet them out now in our careers and see where we all went, because I don't think any of us would have predicted, or very few of us would have predicted where we ended up.
Yeah, I just came from the Purdue University Pharmacy. I'm a teaching assistant
okay.
for the class
Yeah.
for the P1s.
Yeah.
So that was my mad dash over
Yes.
to this
Okay.
building.
Yeah.
But just it's a completely different world.
Yeah.
That between what you do now.
Yeah.
Could you have predicted it?
No, no, I definitely could not have predicted it. I think I remember actually in therapeutics, I didn't like oncology. I thought it was boring, for lack of a better word. It was a time when all we had was chemo. And it was just like all these different acronyms like RCHOP and GEMOX and all these things and having to memorize that. And it was kind of a slash and burn approach. And I remember thinking, like, I don't want to do that to people. That just seems kind of brutal. And I didn't really see how I could be instrumental. HIV, I kind of knew early. I would have thought HIV, I would still be there, except that the science evolved. And with things like PrEP coming on board and simplification of medications, people started doing better. It's not to say we've eradicated it, but it certainly is a much more manageable chronic disease and preventable disease. And so transferring my knowledge of the immune system from HIV to heme malignancies, and now in the setting of chemoimmunotherapy and a lot of the immunomodulation that we're doing as opposed to chemo, I think has been, now I understand why I'm here. It makes sense to me now, but I know I would not have predicted it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. What is it about like working in the oncology field that you like?
I think one of the things that I like in oncology is that it's rapidly evolving. So trying to make sense of a lot of data coming from a lot of different sources is challenging, but very, very rewarding. Obviously, almost everyone has been touched by cancer somehow. Both my parents are cancer survivors. You know, everyone has someone in their life that has dealt with cancer. And so I think it's a very personal mission to most of the people that work in it. And the idea that we're doing much better with a lot of tumor types, but we haven't cured or eradicated cancer means that there's still a lot of work to do and there's a lot of potential. So those are the things that really drive me day to day.
Yeah. Before your current role at Johnson & Johnson, you worked in academia, right?
I did, yeah.
Could you tell us more about how your time in academia got you into the industry?
Yeah, so not a usual path to industry. So when I finished my residency in Atlanta, I took on a position at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Pharmacy, and it was a clinical position where I was located at the Kansas City Free Health Clinic. KC Free is a free health clinic that was started in the late 60s, early 70s with the intent to help with care gaps. It was entirely free, so we had a small dispensary that I sort of oversaw and then managed chronic disease management for uninsured patients. And then we were also a recipient of Ryan White Care Act funding, so HIV patients that didn't have insurance. So we were doing HIV therapy, medication management there. And I did that for a number of years, really was deep into public health and the role of pharmacy in public health. You have to remember this is a time before pharmacists were giving immunizations. So the idea that a pharmacist would be, you know, doing screenings and immunizations was a little bit unheard of. But it was fun times. But I kept yearning for more. I wanted to have some people leadership. I wanted the opportunity to impact more than one patient at a time, even though my value or kind of my mission statement every day is to help one person be just a little bit better, you know, have something that's a little bit better than the day before, or be a little bit better. I was struggling with that in the clinic. And so there was an opportunity to join J&J as part of their HIV medical affairs group, and I saw that as an opportunity to impact more patients through making sure their clinicians, their providers really understood the science and understood the standard of care, and that's how I ended up with J&J. And then, you know, at J&J, they've given me a number of opportunities, both in HIV, but as well as hematologic malignancies and solid tumors. And so I've been really grateful for that because it's given me a broad sort of range of opportunities, but skill set to build on.
Yeah. Could you talk more about your current role and that skill set? What things are important?
Yeah.
What does your typical day look like?
Yeah, so I am currently the therapeutic area lead for lymphoma and myeloid in the United States. And so the US being the biggest market, that really means that I'm responsible for the medical affairs strategy, which includes things like investigator-initiated studies. It's helping R&D with their pivotal studies, making sure we have the right US sites. It's thinking about how we communicate our data, presenting data at medical meetings, providing strategy to the medical science liaisons who are out in the field talking to physicians. It's cultivating relationships with thought leaders and learning their take on things and how we want to incorporate that. It's also engaging with patients to determine how we can do better and what barriers there are to treatment that we can help with. So every day is different and no 2 days are the same. Most days I start my day quite early because I'm an early bird, and it's a mixture of meetings with different stakeholders, traveling to medical meetings and congresses. It's a lot of inner collaboration. I would say that's one thing that is really important in my role. It's collaborating with a lot of different stakeholders within the company, and so I spend a lot of time in meetings with them. And then, I spend time making sure I'm scanning the literature, doing PubMed searches, understanding all these things that, you learned in drug info or learned in school. Believe it or not, 20 years later, I'm still using them, still how I analyze data, doing journal clubs. We do all of that just to make sure that we're up to date on the science.
Yeah.
Right now I'm responsible for ibrutinib, which is used in CLL and is currently marketed and available, but we still have investigator-initiated studies and data dissemination. And then there's 2 investigational programs, one in AML with a menin inhibitor called bleximenib, and then a bispecific CAR-T in lymphoma. And I think what's really cool about CAR-T is it's taking the patient's own immune system and targeting it to fight their tumor type. It's like science fiction, I always say, but it's real. These things keep me very active and busy.
Yeah, I say the same thing with the stem cell therapies
Yeah.
and how they want to start implementing them. I say the same thing with the science fiction.
Yeah.
Is that
Well, in nuclear pharmacy, you said you're interested in. So tell me
Yes.
more about how you got interested in that.
Yeah, it was I kind of stumbled across nuclear pharmacy. I knew in high school that I was really interested in radioactivity. And I also knew that I wanted to be a pharmacist, but knew when I wanted to be a pharmacist, there's nothing I could do with radioactivity there. And then I kind of stumbled upon a list of different types of pharmacy. I thought, well, nuclear sounds neat, at least. So I did some more digging into that. It ended up leading me to Purdue. But I think it's really cool how we can take these different isotopes and we use their half-life and their molecular structures, and we get them bound to all of these different molecules that end up going throughout the body. I think it's really, really interesting how targeted and specific these things can be. And I'm really excited for this new wave of nuclear medicine that's coming out and how that's going to impact patients. So I read a lot of journal articles about those too.
So see, 20 years later, you'll be doing the same thing.
Yes, something to look forward to.
Absolutely something to look forward to. That having that curiosity is important. That's what keeps a lot of options open for you, but it also, I think, is what sets you apart from colleagues, is that curiosity and commitment to learning more.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you've talked about how you have this incredible position. There must be a lot of leadership aspects that come with that. Can you talk about what are some of the most important aspects of leadership, especially when leading a team in this high stakes environment?
I mentioned this before, but I think being really clear about what your values are and what's important to you and what type of leader you want to be. So I know that I am an empathetic leader. That is one of the things that's important to me. And my team has to feel that way too. It's one thing to say it, but my team has to feel that way. And I think a good leader that has people reporting to them takes time to develop their people and really gets to know their people and understand what their needs and wants and strengths are. Another thing that I think of as a leader that is one of my skill sets is innovation, embracing innovation. So finding those opportunities to do things differently. One of the pet peeves I have is when I ask, well, why are we doing something this way? And it's always, because it's always been done that way. that is not an acceptable answer, not to stay competitive and not to be agile. It doesn't mean that the old ways aren't good ways. I mean, sometimes we still use the old ways, but I do think embracing innovation and working with a lot of my different partners is vital to success in this role. And it's, we're now into a place where we're starting to look at how we use data and how we analyze data and data science. And there's a lot I don't know, but a lot that I think is there. And finding the people that do know and connecting with them, and then building on their expertise to try new things is a huge part of staying competitive in a very busy environment. And then I think listening. Yeah, it's as corny as it sounds, but listening and making sure, because so often I hear people in meetings, they're not listening, and so they're asked a question and they answer maybe not the right way, or they get put on the spot and they get defensive. And I have found that the more that I listen, the easier it is to understand what the question is, what the real question is. That is incredibly helpful, but also listening to the people that are experts when they tell you something, when they give you advice. Doesn't mean you have to take it, but listening, I think, is also a really important skill. So those are really the three things that I think of when I think about my leadership journey and what's been really valuable and effective for me.
Yeah, going back to the innovative products, I see a lot of that in nuclear.
Yeah.
Not that we have a ton of old products to work
Well,
with.
no, but right.
But I see a lot of, there's like second line options
Yep.
that had been the first line ones. How do you balance using these new innovative options with financial constraints?
Yeah, I mean, the financial constraints are definitely real.
Yeah.
And I always think of, am I being a good steward of the money that I'm given, whether it's $1 million or 100,000, whatever it is that the budget I have is, am I a good steward of it? Listen, I think one of the things I learned in clinic, working at the free health clinic with a very limited formulary, was how to get really, really good at using the tools that I had. And had I had more tools, had I had every drug under the sun, would patients have done better? Maybe, but maybe not, right? It was really being really, really effective with what I had. And I have that same approach to even embracing innovation of what can we leverage that we have, what is good spend, and maybe what is spend that isn't helping us. And, a very real example of that just happened this week is, we have studies that we, investigator-initiated studies that we align to and agree, because it's that physician or researcher is going to investigate something that we think is really important to the scientific body of evidence for our product, but maybe not something that we want to invest in from a getting an indication with the FDA. So we do a lot of investigator-initiated studies. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is that, and this is a great example, is we had this great concept, really brilliant concept. 3 years later, we don't have a patient enrolled. And the reason is that the contracting between the academic center and our company, as well as staff changes, all of these things have led to this slowdown. Now I have to make the difficult decision of, do we greenlight this study, knowing it's maybe $1 million spend, for example, knowing that we won't get data for another 3 years out of it. Will that data be relevant when we get it, or is it time to say this just took too long and we have to walk away from it? No one wants to deliver bad news. When I was in clinic and I was doing HIV tests for people, or I was testing blood sugar, nobody wants to give bad news. But at the same time, you have to be very realistic. And, a study like that, where maybe we have to decide to close that study because it's not going to be relevant to us. And people's feelings are hurt. And you wonder, well, if what that data generated helped someone. Those are tough decisions. But at the end of the day, I don't know the relevancy of that data when it comes out, because what I do know is that the total healthcare environment is changing, and how we treat specific diseases is changing. So can I use that money then for something else that might be more relevant?
Yeah. What changes do you expect to see, especially in your areas, in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think like some of the stuff you're interested in, radionucleotides, targeting tumors with little bouts of radiation, kind of that science fiction stuff that we joked about early on, I think is definitely an area we see interest. More device drug combinations, I definitely see. So we're seeing, you know, things that you used to get an infusion for at the infusion center, now we have on-body devices where a patient can just stick it on, walk around, and essentially they're getting anti-cancer therapy. Some of the work we're doing with CAR T, leveraging patients' own immune system, these things to have the body basically rid itself of disease. I think this is definitely the future. Other things like wearable devices, how we can use wearable devices like Fitbits and Apple Watches and Oura Rings to monitor for side effects before the patient's even aware of them, so that we can manage side effects. These are other things that I see the industry's moving towards. And then in oncology, it's really getting away from chemo. I think that's the #1 goal of any company that's in oncology right now, is we just want to get rid of chemo, because chemo comes at a particular cost of long-term side effects and other sequelae that we can do better. And so small molecules, targeted therapy, really looking at your disease, looking at genetic markers, that I think, you know, that's true in oncology. I think it's could be true in other diseases too. And it is true in other diseases, but I think will only evolve.
Yeah. What do you think are some trends, either, you know, now that you're seeing or that you're predicting in the future, trends that would surprise someone that doesn't work in the pharmacy industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that stuff I talked about with drug device combinations. We have this really cool thing at J&J. It's the TARE 200, and we've presented some data on. Essentially, it's a silicone tube. It's for people with bladder cancer. So one of the downsides, I mean, there's many downsides of bladder cancer, but one of the downsides is that people often have to lose their bladder, and so then they end up, you know, without a bladder and having to deal with a bag and things like that. So we've developed this. It's a small silicone tube, and it's inserted like a catheter. And then once it gets to the bladder, it curls up into a pretzel, and it's about this big. That pretzel is filled with the drug, and that drug just slowly starts to seep out. What happens then is the urine basically turns into the chemo, and it bathes the bladder with this chemo, targeting right there. So the patient's not getting the systemic effects of the chemo, but it's right there at the target of interest. And then it's removed in the office. That kind of stuff I think is really novel. It's really exciting. I just see a future more of that. So we talked a little bit about some of the new technology. I'm curious what Purdue is doing to prepare you as a student for new innovative therapies and technology.
Yeah, I think kind of like we've talked about with the journal clubs. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that, you know, I can't say that was my favorite class, but I do see that those skills coming back through, because everything is always changing. Mm-hmm. It's really the ability to comprehend that information mm-hmm. and then figure out how it applies that I think is going to be one of the most important skills with dealing with innovation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think it's really having those classes focused on those skills, even as much as you know, they say, write the journal club paper, and I'm like, like, not this again.
Right.
But I really do think that that's going to be one of those skills that I keep coming back to. And hopefully it gets a little bit easier.
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it will. You won't have to write a paper. That's the thing that'll change. But I think the way you evaluate the data and how you look at new technologies will stay the same and will help you tremendously, like you said.
Yeah. Hey, as long as I don't have to write the paper, I'm okay with that.
You have to write other things, emails and reports and things like that, but no papers.
Yeah. What are some things, like, what's an advice you would give to a young pharmacist? Like, looking back on all the things that you've seen, all of the things you've accomplished, what advice would you have?
Yeah, so there's like two things I would say. One is figure out what lights you up. What is the thing that makes you feel happy? Like, what is the thing when you're doing it and you step away and you go, wow, that was a great day? It sounds like for you, you've had that with nuclear, right?
Yes.
Like it's that thing that lights you up, it gets you excited, makes you want to read more. So be really clear about what that is and then make your decisions based off of that. And that might change, right? As your interests evolve, the thing that lights you up might change, but be really clear about what that is. If you use that as your North Star, then your career will look like a lot of different things, but it will be authentic to you. And I think the other thing is understand what your superpowers are, because everyone has superpowers. Like what is something that makes you unique, and what do you bring to the table, because it's an easy skill set for you to exercise. And again, I think when you're really clear about that, and you don't have to be leading people or have a ton of experience to know what that is, then you can find those opportunities for yourself that align with your superpowers and the thing that lights you up and the thing you feel passionate about.
Yeah. We've kind of touched on it indirectly, but I know you have a passion for health equity.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't make sense to me that your zip code should inform the type of care that you get. It doesn't make sense to me that things beyond your control, like your race, ethnicity, your gender, your socioeconomic status, whether you live in a suburban or rural, that should be one of your determinants of health, never really felt fair to me. And so I've been acutely interested throughout my own career and even now of how do we decrease the care gaps so that more people can get effective care. And that's why I've been really impressed by what the Checky has been doing, and have had a chance to sit and chat with Jasmine, and having the opportunity to help support the charitable pharmacy, because I really believe that we have this opportunity to lift everyone up if we lift up the most vulnerable of us and decrease some of those care gaps. That only is going to bring better health for all of us and help the system in general. And, you know, I've seen a lot in 20 years. I've seen a lot of changes, but I haven't necessarily seen a decrease in those gaps. And so, you know, a lot of the work that is being done here at Purdue is really important to me to highlight and to talk about with my colleagues, because I think it's such important work.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had a bit of a health scare a little over 2 years ago. I had a doctor tell me that he thought I had lymphoma, but my insurance company only covers services rendered back home in New England.
Oh my gosh.
So I spent the entire semester here trying to get services covered. And so just the couple months of every day calling them, trying to figure out what was going on, it showed me a completely different side of healthcare that I had never seen before.
Yeah.
And 21's a little young to be going through that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it gave me such an appreciation for all of the different things that people go through in our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And I agree that equity is so important.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the best time in my life.
I bet not, right.
And right, but if I can do something to help someone else, prevent someone else from going through that, then I think that's an incredible mission.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, first of all, that happened to you, because that would be incredibly scary. And I'm not sure at 21 I would have had the tools to help me deal with that. But how beautiful that it brought you to this place to understand that there are people, you know, living like that every single day. And, you know, even, you know, my own parents who don't have a health background, thank goodness I'm around to try to interpret things for them. I've also, you know, dealt with insurance hurdles or misdiagnoses and all of that. If it's hard for us to manage and we work in this system, I can only imagine how it feels for folks that don't work in this system and have a lot of competing priorities. So anything I can do to make that a little bit easier, even if it's just for one person, will feel like a life well lived.
Yes. Yeah. Last summer, my grandmother was prescribed a CGM for her type 2 diabetes, but no one would put it on her. So just having the ability to help her with that, that was something that, you know, health equity, she had a high school degree. She was also 80 years old, so I don't know how they expected her.
Yeah, how do you even, where do you even explain why she should have it? Nonetheless, the importance of it, how to put it on, things we take for granted.
Yes, she was very upset with it, by the way. It kept beeping at her.
Yeah.
I said, that's because you need to take your insulin.
Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to be annoying
I
you.
was
Yeah.
like, it's gonna annoy you until you take your insulin. Then she
Yeah.
ended up telling me, she was like, I don't know what's wrong with this
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just the health literacy
Yeah,
thing
change
and
is hard, right? Yeah.
yes.
And you know, people, it's hard to admit that you have an illness. It's hard to be reminded that you have an illness. And, you know, regardless of what route you take in pharmacy, pharmacy is a healing profession. And so we have an obligation to help people understand these things and make it maybe just a little less scary for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And I've had a wonderful time having you here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I have one last question
Okay.
for you. I like to ask a fun question
Okay,
when
great.
we finish up.
Shoot.
So my question for you, if you could pick an animal that best represents your personality, what would that animal be?
Well, I'm inclined to say dog because I love dogs so much, but I'm probably a little more active, at least in my dog. My dog is a great office dog, but not good at much else. I think it would probably be a bird.
Okay.
And that's because I really enjoy seeing the big picture and sort of looking above at things. And I imagine a bird gets to do that all the time, right? They're flying above, they're seeing everything below and then touching down. That's, I think, how I think and how I work and how I think. Sometimes probably to my detriment, where people would like to pull me back down to the ground. But yeah, I think a bird. That's a great question.
Yeah, fantastic answer.
Oh, thank you.
And again, thank you so much for being here today. This has been
my pleasure.
wonderful.
And good luck to you. I can't wait to see what happens with your career and
yeah,
all the exciting things in store.